Hey folks, I'm Allison. Welcome to my channel. I've been on YouTube about 1 month now, and so I thought today's video would be a good time to do the BookTube Newbie Tag. I've seen a lot of other people do this tag on their channel, and it seemed like a great way to give a little bit of context into who I am and what I'm hoping to do with this channel. The first question is, why start a BookTube channel? The short answer is, I needed some hobbies. I love reading, I read a lot, but I had been thinking a lot recently about the fact that all of my favorite hobbies basically involve consuming something that someone else has created, and very few of them, really none of them, give me like the opportunity for creative outlet. You know, if I'm reading a book that someone else wrote, or listening to music that someone else wrote, or, you know, going to a yoga class that someone else has put together, or playing bar trivia, none of those are like me creating something. But another piece of this is that I'm trying to be more conscientious about how I'm spending my time. I feel like this past couple of years, I have been spending way too much time online shopping and doom scrolling, and this year, I'm trying to do a no by year. And actually, we're 1 month in. I have successfully made it through a no by January, and I'm hoping to continue this momentum through the rest of the year so that I can spend my money on things I care about instead of just giving it all to billionaires. But as a result, all of the time that I used to spend online shopping and doom scrolling, I now have freed up. And so I thought, editing videos, you know, I can sit on my couch with my coffee and a candle and edit videos instead of online shop or doom scroll, and it will still give me the opportunity to chill out and decompress at the end of the day, but also to try to direct my efforts into something that brings me more joy and fulfillment. The second question is, what do I bring, and I guess what does the channel bring that is unique? I know people really struggle to answer this question. I've seen a lot of people in these videos talking about how difficult it is. And so I think instead of trying to talk about what I'm doing that no one else on the internet is doing, because obviously that's impossible these days, I'm just gonna tell you what I want for the channel. I wanna create a space to share in the joy of reading. My hope is that watching these videos will make you want to go read a book, you know, that it will help you engage more critically with what you're reading, help me engage more critically with what I'm reading, help you figure out what to read next, you know, give me opportunities to see what other people are reading so I can make educated choices about what I want to read next. But crucially, my hope is that this channel will not feed into the overconsumption of books. I want to make videos that you will come away from wanting to go read a book and not just wanting to go endlessly shop for more books. I don't say that to be judgy at all. You know, I mean, as I just said, I'm on my own journey to unlearn these overconsumption habits. And my hope is that starting this channel and trying to become part of the BookTube community in a more active way instead of just, you know, endlessly lurking as I have been for several years, will also not push me towards a place of feeling like I just want to buy and buy more and more books. And I'm trying to be really conscientious about that in my own life. And so I'm hoping that this will be a space that you can also engage with thoughtful book content that doesn't tempt you to then go spend all your money at Barnes & Noble. Along those lines, I'm not going to be doing huge book hauls. I am not going to be able to give you a tour of my, you know, hundreds of thousands of books on my giant bookshelves, because I am picky about which books I am going to carry around with me through life. The vast majority of books that come into my life then go back out of it. I'm a very active participant in no-buy groups, and also, side note, the No Buy Project has rolled out its own app, and it is actually fabulous. So I would definitely recommend checking that out if you are trying to get engaged in your local gifting economy while also cutting down on your doom scrolling time. I'm also not going to be trying to push myself to read tons and tons of books just to like make grist for the content mill. My TBRs are going to be my realistic hopes for the next few books that I'm going to read. My reading wrap-ups are not going to be probably, you know, dozens and dozens of books, because this is sort of one of my hobbies, but it's competing with a lot of other things for my time, as, you know, I think is true for a lot of people. So my hope is to present a non-competitive, realistic picture of what one person who reads as a hobby is reading and thinking about the things that they're reading. The next question is, why do I love reading? And funnily enough, this one I thought was actually much more difficult to answer than the previous one. I think my answer is really tautological. I just do love reading. There's nothing like being totally sucked into an amazing book. I mean, when I'm like really into something I'm reading, no movie or TV show can ever match the level of like immersion and excitement and, you know, the tug at your heartstrings and all of that. I feel like there's nothing like it. I think also I've been reading a lot lately because I've been needing an emotional outlet. Things feel a bit dark in the world right now, and I have been really leaning on books. I've particularly been drawn to books with happy endings, or, you know, books where the stakes are very low and nothing terrible is going to happen to anyone. But I've also been reading a lot of like sci-fi and fantasy books lately. Those books often have such a lovely sense of sort of justice in the resolution. The protagonist wins and defeats the bad guys, and, you know, everyone lives happily ever after. And I have really been leaning into the escapism of books like that lately. It is obviously really important to be engaged in the world, but I also think it's important to have time for yourself to like step back and, you know, seek respite, and books have been that for me lately. The next question is, what book got me into reading? I have such a specific memory of this. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was published in 1997 when I was in the first grade. I received it later that year as a 7th birthday gift, and my dad, who used to, you know, read books to me at night as a kid, started reading Harry Potter to me. About halfway through that book, I got really impatient, waiting for the like time in our nighttime routine every day for my dad to read the book to me. And so I was like, just give it to me, I'll just have it, and I'll just read it myself. Basically, that is the moment that I transitioned from my parents reading to me before bed to me reading to myself before bed. From then on, I just was a voracious reader. The next question is, what is a book or a book series that I really love? I'm going to answer this in two parts. I'm going to give you the like all-time answer, and then I'm going to give you the like recently answer. So my favorite book of all time is The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing. It is a book about an author with writer's block. She is fragmenting her life into these various notebooks that she keeps trying to write her next book, but is really stymied by the inability to integrate the various aspects of her life into one another. The philosophy of it in terms of identity and narrative and the way that the stories that we tell ourselves impact who we are, and the way that the ending of a story impacts the way we understand the beginning of the story, and the way that our experiences as they change over time color our memories, the way that that means we're not able to really maintain a stable identity because the person that we were when we were experiencing the things that we experienced is not the person that we are when we're remembering those things. All of that is incredible. However, this book was written a long time ago. The feminism is very second wave dated, and there are some like outright homophobic pieces. Thankfully, most of them are like in a sort of weird aside, but I do want to sort of give this warning, like this is an old book. It has a lot going for it, but it also has some serious drawbacks. That said, this book colors the way that I think about like myself and my experiences and the people around me, and the way that I define and characterize my own identity and my life as I'm living through it. And, it was like a fundamentally transformational book for me when I first read it, and I just love it. Like, it's just amazing. The second part of the answer, which is books that I've loved recently, is a tie between two fantasy series. The Scholomance series by Naomi Novik, which the first book of that is called A Deadly Education, and the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir. The first book of that is called Gideon the Ninth, although that series is not finished. We're still waiting on the fourth book, So, I mean, not that I'm saying you shouldn't go read it, you should definitely go read it, but there's some risk in saying a book series is your favorite before it's been finished. So I'm just flagging, you know, as of the 3 books that we have now and my expectation for what the 4th book will be, The Locked Tomb and Scholomance are my favorite 2 that I've read recently. I think the things that I like about those books are similar. I think I can sort of talk about them together because I think I have loved them for basically the same reasons. Both of them have a female main character with a very unique narrative voice. The characters are funny and sarcastic and grumpy and stubborn. It's just fun. It's just been a very like refreshing take from, you know, from fantasy that is written in a sort of like highfalutin kind of old-timey way. I also love these books because the world building in both is really fun. I think neither of them are books where like the world building strikes me as totally fleshed out to every corner of the universe, where like the author totally understands how everything works in the world, you know, to a degree where like there's no weird sort of world building holes or like weird inconsistencies between the way things work. I don't think either of these authors are going to, after they finish this series, write a bunch more series in the same world just because they've like spent so much time building this world. It's not like a Tolkien or an Orson Scott Card situation where the world is the thing and then there's sort of narratives happening within it. This is, you know, these are worlds that are built specifically to facilitate stories, but the worlds are so fun. I think both of these books really stand out in terms of the sort of uniqueness of the feel of the world when you're in it, but also maybe more fundamentally, these books are absolute bangers. Every single book in, I think, either of these 2 series I read in max 2 days. Most of them I read in 1 sitting. Once you start reading them, you cannot put them down. I often run across books that I'm enjoying, that I can, you know, that I can sit down and read in a sitting or in a couple of days if I don't really have anything else going on. But both of these series are the kind of books where I will cancel plans to finish reading this book, you know, and that is really special. The next question is, who are the YouTubers that I follow? I think I mostly follow sort of well-known YouTubers that other people will have also heard of. Read with Cindy, I really like Uncarly, Jack in the Books. I also have recently been engaging with a lot of like smaller YouTube channels. You know, now that I've like started my channel, I'm trying to get a sense of what other people with small channels are doing. A few of the channels that I have been, the like smaller channels that I have been watching recently are Sin's Book Nook, Olivia in the City, The Spinster's Library, Robert G. Reader of Books, Amanda Should Be Reading, and Cat and Too Many Books. And I will link all of those in the description. The next question is, where do I read? I am an inside reader. I am very easily distractible. And so if I'm reading outside and like a bug is biting me or the wind is blowing the pages or there's a lot of noise happening around me or like the grass is itchy, I will get really distracted. And so I mostly read inside, either in my house, I have like a big comfy cozy reading chair, or I love reading at a coffee shop because I love a little treat. The next question is, what kind of books do I read? I would say the 3 main categories are literary fiction, sci-fi and fantasy, and poetry. I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I went through a phase, and I mean, this was years ago now, but like particularly when I was at university, where I felt like I should be reading good for me books. I had this like big TBR stack of nonfiction books about social phenomena and historical events and important people and economic trends, like all sorts of things that like objectively would be really good to know about and to read about, and I would love to be someone who has read those books. But it turned out I was not someone who wanted to read those books, and I felt guilty starting like frivolous books because I knew I had this like stack of books that I should be reading. I'm someone who generally reads 1 book at a time, and so if I'm stuck a third of the way through a book that I'm not enjoying, I'm not gonna like go pick up a book I actually want to read and read that. I'm just going to sort of look at the book I don't want to read and then be like, I guess I'll do something other than read. And that it just like wasn't a system that worked for me. And so during early COVID, I decided that I was just gonna have to cut myself a break and let myself read the things that I want to read, because the system that I had was like not actually getting me to read these books I thought I should be reading. It was just resulting in me not reading anything. And so now I have become someone who genuinely just reads the things that I want to read. I will DNF a book so fast. I mean, I try to get through like a third, but like if I can get through a third of a book and I'm not into it, gone. Like I feel no guilt. I'm spending my time doing things that like are fulfilling. And I've realized there are a lot of other ways that I can get that information. You know, I can listen to a podcast. The result is a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of literature. I love poetry. Very, very little nonfiction these days. The last question on the list is, what is my book collection like? And as I alluded to earlier, my book collection is quite small. I am not a keeper of books. I sort of try not to be a keeper of things in general. No shade. I totally love walking into someone's house and they have an entire wall of bookshelves. I think that that is so cool, but it stresses me out. I'm like not a big knickknacks person. And again, you know, no shade. Like I have friends who are big knickknacks people and they come into my house and are like, does anyone even live here? But I need space to breathe or I get stressed out. So my book collection is only the books that I really, really love. I have behind me, I will say, a shelf that is, it used to be my TBR, and actually when it was my TBR, it was like smaller than this, but it has become a combination of TBR and books that I am using or I'm thinking about using in videos. So there's like a little bit of squidginess happening to my like strict only books that I super, super love rule that is the result of trying to do this BookTube channel. But my main bookshelf is downstairs and it is not a huge bookshelf. It's like a medium size 3-shelf bookshelf, and it is mostly, but not totally full, with books that I love. And you can see it in the background of some of my videos and some of my shorts, like a little chunk of it. So if you're curious, that's what it looks like. Also, I think it's posted on my Blue Sky. Follow me on Blue Sky. I am over there chatting with people about books all the time. It's a really fun little community. My handle is @WonderlandBooks, but the like profile name is Allison is not in Wonderland, so it should be easy to find me. And I guess the other sort of key piece of information about that is I do not commingle my TBR and my bookshelf. The books that are in my shelf downstairs are books that I have read the entirety of and loved enough that I'm willing to like lug them around with me in life. So books up here, maybe I haven't read, but every book that is downstairs on my shelf, I have not only read, but read and loved, with the somewhat significant exception of the books of poetry. I am a big believer that like books of poetry are not necessarily meant to be read cover to cover in one sitting in the way that a novel can be. And so I consider there's like a chunk of the shelf that is all books of poetry, and they are all in like various stages of being read because I consider that like a little bit of a working library. So there are books of poetry on my bookshelf that I have started but am in the middle of, you know, or I also reread books of poetry a lot because like, poetry, you're not trying to like figure out the twist, right? And then once you've read it, it's like, oh, okay, now I know the twist, right? Like poetry is meant to be read and reread. So I treat that little bit of my collection differently. To end the video, I'm going to answer a series of rapid fire questions that I found online. The book that I have reread the most is definitely the Black Jewels trilogy by Anne Bishop. A book that deserved the hype, Dune. A book that I thought should have gotten hype, The Girl with All the Gifts. Although I have to say the caveat, I read it in early COVID, and so I don't know if it would hit the same now, but at the time I read it, it really hit. Books that I usually recommend or that anyone should read, I would say any book of poetry by Mary Oliver or Wendy Cope. A book that I thought I would hate, The Atlas Six. I just read it recently in December. You can check out my December reading wrap-up video, but I usually don't like books that have multiple character perspectives. I usually like to have one or two character like narrative perspectives in the book, and I feel like it gets kind of chaotic sometimes when you have a bunch, or you know, I like care a lot about one character's story and then I'm like slogging through chapters about a character I don't like. But I thought The Atlas Six did it really well. I unexpectedly really liked it. A book that made me cry, definitely The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. It's beautiful, amazing, tragic, but it will definitely make you cry. The book with my favorite characters, I definitely would say the Locked Tomb trilogy by Tamsin Muir. Every single one of the characters throughout the books is just such a delight. A book where I wish I could live in the world, maybe Old School by Tobias Wolff. It's about this like boys' posh boarding school where they just like spend all their time like eating in these like great mess halls and like meeting famous authors and like thinking deep thoughts about books. And I think maybe I just like miss student life is what's happening, but that book, I would definitely go live in that world for a while. The last question is a book to cure reading slump. And I would say maybe one of Naomi Novik's standalone books. I think the Scholomance series could be a bit intimidating if you've been in a reading slump to start a 3-book series, but Spinning Silver or Uprooted are 2 of her standalone books, and both of them are also page turners. So that's the end of the rapid fire questions I have. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to hear more from me, please consider subscribing. And thank you so much for spending some of your one wild and precious life with me watching this video. Goodbye.